topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
It's Wendy on Wednesday, and I'm welcoming you to Triversity Talk. Very solemn day, 9/11, and I'm sure each one of us who's watching tonight and listening can remember where they were and what they were doing on 9/11 and how it changed the world. This is my second podcast today, but I can't get through any of my shows without acknowledging what this day was. And I remember I was 20 blocks from where the first plane hit. And to this day, still can't wrap my head around what happened. And as human beings, it became a very hard thing for us to process. Many of us knew people that were in the towers, Windows of the World, if you remember that, the restaurant, the people that were working there, Cantor Fitzgerald. So just I'm taking a moment to acknowledge what happened on that day. And last night, there was a lot of good feelings among people over the debates. I'm an idealist, and I want to just believe, like, going forward, that things are going to get better. So thank you for hearing me out tonight. So I have a very excited tonight's guest. I actually met him through a friend of mine, the amazing Rose Trentman, who we all kind of like introduce people to other people that we think are fabulous. And she says, I met this guy at a barbecue. He's a poet, and he's having a launch and a reading of his new book. And I didn't know much else about him besides that. And we went up to Cultural Center in East Harlem, and that is where I met my amazing guest who is here tonight, a queer Afro-Nuyorican, I'll never say that correctly, poet, an educator, a cultural entrepreneur, a budding playwright, and I love this, reppin the Bronx and East Harlem. His work explores themes of identity, family, intergenerational trauma, sexuality, and love, writing in the hope as he heals, he can help others heal as well. I just absolutely love that. Please welcome Nicco Diaz. There you are.
Thank you, Wendy. That was a great introduction. I appreciate you.
Well, of course. And I appreciate you being here. And I appreciate you wearing a shirt to coordinate with my background.
I have to represent.
You're representing.
I saw the flyer and I was inspired. So then.
Right. I have a lot of colors.
The entire shirt is I Heart the BX.
Yay. And a shout out. A big shout out to the Bronx. I just loved going to your reading that night. There were just so many things. And even beyond your amazing book, which I'm going to show here, it's called Unchin Chin. And let's just kick off with the sell. How do people get this?
Well, the direct way, I have an online bookstore, which they can find on Instagram. Okay. So if you find me on Instagram, you can follow me at Nicco Diaz, NICCODIAZ.NYC on IG. And it's in the link in my bio, and they can buy it directly from me. I am making these. I decided to self-publish and bookbind these myself. So, it's very, for me, I wanted it to be very personal and counter to a lot of the mass production that exists with the ease of printing now with like Amazon, Kindle on demand, all the kind of printing things. I really wanted this to feel more personal. So I went that route.
Which it totally does. I even want to point out to the thread in the binding.
Yes.
Okay, and you have to share with everybody before we get into everything about you. Please share the story of the cover, where this cover came from.
So this entire book started as a file, like one that you put pink and inside is red. And I saw them when I was at my stepmother's office, and I had already had the idea to create a book of some sort. And when I saw the material, I was like, okay, boom, I'm going to use this. Can I get some free materials? So she donated them to me. Shout out to Awilda, which is who introduced me to Rose, who Rose introduced me to you. So this would not be possible without Awilda in so many ways.
Of course, so many things wouldn't be possible without Miss Rose. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. So so from there, I was like, I created a prototype of this with the threading, and I chose thread as opposed to glue because again, glue is for me industrial.
It is right, and typical.
Yeah, artisanal and more. It reminded me of the fates from Greek mythology, and just so happened to have 3, like past, present, and future. So it all tied into that alchemy. But the actual cover itself was designed by a good friend of mine, Viajero, who's a Nuyorican visual artist. And I came to him with the idea for this Taino sun, which is the indigenous group that's from Puerto Rico, where my family traces its lineage. And he was like, "Oh, I got you," and he designed it out of the kindness of his heart for free.
Of course.
So, yeah, and it kind of when I found the cover and everything, and I decided to do stamping instead of again mass produced ink.
Right. And tell me what the sun represents to the indigenous people.
I mean, Puerto Rico's a sunny place. So the sun bears a big significance as sort of like the major deity that is of worship. And this particular one, there's different versions of it, but this one is called the Great Seal, and it was worn by caciques in Puerto Rico. And so caciques is the name of what they would term chiefs of the tribe. And chiefs were not only warlords, but they also did rituals and rites and invoked song and poetry and dance. So I sort of see that connection with myself as a leader in my community through arts. And so that's why I chose this symbol, because it meant so much.
Well, it's so perfect. And you also call yourself a cultural entrepreneur.
Yeah, I definitely do.
And I really feel like that's why I asked you what the story is behind this symbolic sun. And it fits right in with who you are. The night that you launched your book was really special on many levels because, many of us go to readings. What was so incredible about yours, you had it in a cultural center. You had it in East Harlem. You had your entire family extended and then some there.
Yes.
Mama cooked up I just loved it, by the way. Mama cooked up a storm. And you had aunties there too, didn't you?
Yes. My staff was my family. They catered everything. They cater all our family events. And when I thought about, like, if I wanted to create very home personal feeling, like my family was going to throw down. So they did an excellent job. Shout out to my aunt, my uncle, my brother helped, my mom. So it was a family affair for sure.
It was a family affair, and the feeling in the room where you were reading and the room where the food was being served. I didn't know what to expect because you go to a lot of readings and no one talks to anybody and they all just sit down and wait for the person to be interviewed and talk about their book. Your thing was a whole other thing. You had that incredible indigenous performance that happened during your reading. What was their name?
Yeah, so Bombayo was the
Bombayo?
Bombayo, yeah. So bomba is a very integral art form musically in Puerto Rico. And so it was a sort of an amalgamation, like so many things in Puerto Rico, of like indigenous, African, and European influences, but very pro-Black. Like it really is about resistance and keeping that in mind. And so Dr. Drum, who is the person who I have the connection with, I was like, if I wanted to pay homage to my ancestors, to my roots, who better than Bombayo to come in and perform? So for the first part of it was like a real sort of like invoking the spirit, paying homage to ancestors, and with the food transitioning into then the conversation and then mingling at the end. So that was very intentional on my part. I wanted
the
that.
dancing, the
Yeah, obviously.
yeah, the dancing was just. I lived in Africa, so there was a
Oh,
lot. In Nigeria, in a village called Ife. So I heard
yes,
you saw I was out there dancing because
yes.
I hear that music and all of a sudden every part of me just has to get with it. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there's something I've spoken to a lot of drummers as I've been, navigating the artistic scene here in the Bronx, and there is something powerful about the drum that invokes our humanity in a very strong way.
Yes,
I think it's
it's
somewhere else.
primal. It's a primal
Primal.
thing that it invokes. Why did you choose that cultural center? Oh, and can we say the name of it too?
Yes, so it is Taller Boricua, which is a gallery within the Julia de Burgos Latino Cultural Center in El Barrio, East Harlem. And
Right.
so Taller Boricua is a printmaking workshop and gallery. So they were the ones that managed the space. The entire building is the Julia de Burgos Cultural Arts Center. And Julia de Burgos is sort of like the birth of Puerto Rican poetry in English. She was the first poet to write in English as a Puerto Rican woman, very ahead of her time. She actually passed away like within a few blocks of that center on Madison Avenue.
Well, I saw her picture up. When was
Yeah.
she born and when did she pass?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot, but
Oh, that's okay.
luckily,
When did she pass? So I felt that it was like, yeah, when did she pass?
let me pull it up.
Thank you.
It comes
Because
up
her
quickly.
picture was everywhere.
1953.
So ahead. I ask you this for a reason. So ahead of her time.
Yes. Extremely. It's crazy that that book was like in harm's reach, because you see, like, I would have had to. Anyway, that's
The
powerful.
spirits wanted it that way. I'm a
Exactly.
firm believer in that, right?
Yes, me too. So 1953, she passed away, and she was writing even before the word feminism was a word, she was writing feminist poetry about wanting to be free and not be married to men. And she died on 106, not Madison, 5th, 106 and 5th,
It's incredible.
like
right?
just in the street. And she was buried in Potter's Field, this luminary of literature. And then her family, a few months later, had to come and retrieve her body. So,
And thank God that they did, because
yeah.
I mean, right, she was buried like nobody in Potter's Field, this major person.
Yeah, and so I felt, for me, she's the progenitor of what Nuyorican poetry is, because she was a Puerto Rican transplanted to East Harlem to escape sort of like the political turmoil that was happening in Puerto Rico, because she was part of the Independence Party. And here she was met with a lot of issues. She was in a sanitarium because they thought she was insane, and she had addiction issues, all of that. And yeah, and so for her to be sort of like this amazing figure, to be in the building named after her and blocks away from where she passed away as a queer poet, Nuyorican poet, I felt very much connected to her and
Sure.
invoking the ancestry and all of it. So it was really special to have it in the hood where my family's from, where everything. So it was very,
Well,
it
you
was a
were
lot of
paying
powerful.
homage to her too, which was, I mean, you can't ask for anything more. I had no idea. This is why this is incredible. Not everybody knows who she is.
Right.
A lot of people won't. You came from the hood, you know who she is. A lot of people don't. I'm like, who is this person that I see her picture everywhere? So then now I know who she is. And so did the people I came with that night. And you know what? That is the ultimate in terms of giving respect and educating people about great people that came before, that not everybody gets to have the light shown on them. So it's up to all of us. You're a poet. Yeah. And you really did shine a light on her, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's very much part of the work that I do. I mean, when looking at the dedication, I wrote, I dedicate this book to my ancestors, old and new, for loving and protecting me even when I forsook you. Consider this an atonement and making up for lost time. I am forever grateful. And so I do feel is that is my responsibility as a leader, as a poet, to steward that legacy, because I didn't just end up on this journey, right, of being an artist. Like there's a long tradition that I'm walking. So yeah.
Oh, there's a long tradition you're walking, but this tradition of being an artist, you didn't start out on this tradition. You had a different trajectory.
Very different.
Could you share all of that with us?
For sure. So Well, I grew up in the between the Bronx and East Harlem. So
So you have to
my
tell me what street. I'm a Bronx girl. You know I'm going to ask
okay.
location, location,
Yeah.
location.
So I live on Marshallou Parkway, second stop from the last on the 4 train by Clinton High School.
Right. And
Visit Clinton.
I went to Walton High School. Clinton was where,
Oh,
when I went, all the boys went there. So I knew
yeah. So you could walk straight down by Lehman College and get right to
I went
Walton.
there too, Nicco. So
Yeah, look at
we're
that.
strolling down memory lane right now.
Yes, the power of the Bronx. But my mom believed that the public schools that were in East Harlem were better than the ones that were in the Bronx, local to us. So every day we would make the trek 30, 45 minutes every day for however many years, not to date myself, but yeah, to go down there. And
So
so I
your
very much
mother,
feel,
who I met,
yeah,
who's beautiful, like an
yeah.
incredible smile and an amazing cook. So your mother, from the very beginning, had already decided, you weren't going to go on the typical school path up there. That you're
Mm,
probably the kids in your neighborhood all went to the neighborhood school, but
exactly.
not you. She had already singled you out.
Yeah, she very much felt, and my both my grandmothers are still, excuse the, it's New York City, don't mind the noise. Both my grandmothers are still in El Barrio to this day. And so she felt, and she was working there. So there was a lot of reason to have us in those schools. And especially because she thought they were better. And so, yeah, I went to school there, public schools my whole life, and graduated from Manhattan Center for Science and Mathematics. And was very much like math and science, math and science, math and science,
So
but
were
always
you
loved
really?
poetry.
So I was terrible at math and science. You were really good at math and science.
I was, yeah. I'm able to. I have like I'm pretty good at all subjects if I put my
Oh,
mind
so
to
you're
it.
one of those left brain, right brain people.
Yes,
No, I got it. I've met a whole bunch of them. It's really
yeah.
intimidating.
It's also a lot of grief because it's like I'm always torn between my head and my heart. That's
Right.
literally what I navigate. But
That's why you're a writer, Nicco.
yeah, that's literally, yes. You
Right.
explained it in a nutshell. So from there, I was very much like nobody pushed me to college, but I knew that I wanted to go. And
Right.
I would make and I was in a good school. So I ended up becoming the first person in my family to go straight to college. And I went to Cornell University. So
Okay,
not
so
only did
we're not going to gloss
yeah,
over that because that's
yes,
huge. Okay, there's a couple of things you said. First, in
yes,
your family,
yes,
my dad had been to college. I was a kid from the Bronx, but I think I shared with you. I
yeah,
went to Walton High School. There was no one that like went to Cornell. I think there were two kids of 15 that went away to school to state schools, and then everybody else went to like Bronx Community College, or they figured out what they were going to do next, or they went to Lehman. So
yeah.
we have you. I mean, Cornell. Wow.
Yeah, so Cornell is an Ivy, and
It is.
I knew of Harvard, Yale, Princeton, right? Like those are the big names. But back in 2008, 2009, when I was thinking about college, I'm before that, 2004, 2005, thinking about college, and I got in 06. Cornell was on the radar for like the people who knew about it, but for kids from the hood, like nobody knew about Cornell. But it was in
Absolutely.
my college office where they were like, "Oh, you can apply through this program called the Higher Educational Opportunity Program, which is a function of affirmative action in New York State, and
Okay,
it
well, let's just stop at affirmative action because
yeah,
that's okay. I grew up, of course, with that because I got a
yes,
lot of years on you, as you know. And affirmative action was amazing. It gave a lot of people
yeah,
opportunities. I just do want to point out that that was one of the things that a certain group of political people wanted to get rid of. Just
right.
hear me out.
And that's why I named that explicitly because it is something that needs to be defended and
Thank
protected.
you.
And there has been increasing data since its challenge that we've seen a decrease of diversity in a lot of these institutions. So uh, let's leave that right there. So, but anyway, I am a firm proponent. I am a beneficiary of it, and it gave me more financial aid.
Right.
So I got basically like a free, you know, admission, not admission, but like there was no, I didn't pay tuition for college,
Right.
and
You got, the grants or whatever you want to call it, the
yeah,
scholarships or whatever. But
financial aid,
as we
yeah,
say, your ride was paid for. But
exactly.
I will say you worked for that ride.
Oh yeah,
there were people that would criticize affirmative action as pushing people that were non-deserving getting that, and it was the furthest thing from the truth. Where I went to college, SUNY Binghamton, we had kids that got incredible opportunities, deserved. They worked their butts off. So, you know, you worked for it, and that's amazing.
Yeah. And the work didn't just end when I got in. Like, the work kept going as I was there. Right. And that was where the real work came in, because here I am, the proverbial speck in the grits, right? In a predominantly white institution, coming from a background where I was mostly surrounded by Puerto Rican, Black, and Dominican. And as we were talking a little bit before we went live, but just like underprepared for the kind of.
So everyone when I got to SUNY Binghamton, and I was only there 2 years, I was in the library continually. I had not learned in high school the things they were just prepped in these Long Island public schools. They're great schools. I came to high school in the Bronx, and then Broward Community College down in Florida. Forget it. You know, I was like behind the 8 ball when I got in.
Yeah, and it wasn't like a sense of like intellectual under preparation or that I couldn't keep up there, but it was more of like I didn't have the time management skills. I didn't have the discipline, because, you know, like I just learned how to cram, how to like get the A and keep it moving. But I started pre-med because, again, math and science background, but I always loved literature, so I was always an English major. And then I picked up a Latino studies minor because there was just something about the work that called to me. And so in my studies of English and Latino studies, I really lost the sort of like the luster of being pre-med. So I was in the arts and science program, so I just focused on English, and then was like, I'll figure it out, and I'll just write and study Nuyorican poetry, which is where I discovered a lot of the folks who become influences to me and mentors in a lot of ways.
Wow. Now, have you of course, are affiliated at different points with the Nuyorican Cafe, which everybody knows. Can you talk a little bit about the Nuyorican?
I mean, how much time do you have now? But the Nuyorican Cafe, founded in 1973 in the Lower East Side, Loisaida, as it's affectionately called by the people who live there. It was an enclave of Puerto Ricans from the island, similar to like the South Bronx and East Harlem. It was another one. And so in that place, there was a lot of rough things going on: poverty, crime, drugs, all of that. And so in that space, though, there was a lot of artists because it was affordable to live. And so from all the mixing, two of the founders, Miguel Algarin and Miguel Piñero, founded it in the Lower East Side. It was a storefront first little pop-up, actually in Miguel Algarin's mother's apartment was where the first things were happening. And that's
so I did not know that. That's genius. Was his mother's apartment close by?
It was, yeah. So he was native to the Lower East Side, and so they would meet in his apartment for like big open mics. People would read their poems, and instead of clapping, which was loud and disruptive, they would snap, and because they were doing it late at night after people got out of work, and so the cops, the neighbors would call the cops, and it'd be like loud snapping, like no. So that was their way of evading it. Fun fact: today is Miguel Algarin's birthday.
Are you kidding me? Yes. Okay. Now, how kismet is this? That this was the date that you ended up coming on. I love that.
Yeah, that warms my heart. I didn't know that was going to happen, and all these different things are coming together. But it is his birthday, and yeah. So they founded it in the Lower East Side in 1973 on Halloween, and it spawned just a movement of Nuyorican artists. Pedro Pietri was another big name. Sandra Maria Esteves, Lois Griffith, who's one of the last remaining surviving ones in Brooklyn, and just luminaries in the people of color literary scene. Basquiat was known to be there and pay for his drinks with sketches on napkins. You know,
oh my God, these stories are incredible. So whoever has those napkins, it's worth a fortune now.
I only hope they know what they have.
Yeah, right.
But you know, Basquiat was also himself half Nuyorican. His dad was Haitian, his mother was Puerto Rican, and they grew up in Brooklyn. So there's just a lot of amazing literary voices that came out of that.
he grew up across the street from an artist I just was talking to that was at the Armory Art Show this weekend.
Really?
Yes. Now, how weird is that? He's in Brooklyn. He's a painter. He had work at the Armory. And when he was talking about his background, he's like, and I grew up across the street from the Basquiat family. I mean, come on.
That's amazing.
The chances, right? The world is this big. I've been to the Nuyorican cafe for plays. They do all sorts of things.
Yeah,
now.
it really expanded to beyond just poetry. It's the
Which
Poets
is
Cafe.
great.
Yeah,
Right.
but like poetry sort of lives in all literary pursuits. If I'm honest,
Yeah.
I think it expands across all of it. And so from there, they started doing plays. They've done other productions, a lot of stand up, open mics, everything. So
I've been to all of that there. Yeah, as well.
so 50 years it's been in existence. They recently closed their doors last year for a 3-year renovation because they got a $24 million grant from the city to do that.
So I had no idea. I had heard it was closed. I didn't
Yeah.
hear it was closed for renovation. A $24 million grant from this.
Yes.
See, this kind of stuff, we need to get this out there because people are like, New York has changed. Everything's going down the tubes. It's this, it's that. And they got a grant for $24 million.
Huge grant from the New York Cultural Affairs. Yeah, it's an amazing, investment in the future of the city's artistic landscape and long overdue because that building, I was the chief of staff there. So I was managing everything about it. And
I'm sure you wore many hats.
Yeah, old girl. She was from the early 1900s. She was built and they got it in the 80s. And they had to get an HVAC unit. And that HVAC unit was the same one from the 80s and was going out on us every week in the summer and the winter. So it was like, I was just like, please, let's get through this. And so it was a lot of work. But it's a incredible institution. And fast forwarding through the 90s when poetry really blew up as spoken word poetry, specifically with slam and all these different things. So many of the Grand Slam champions and other folks are like luminaries in the Latina literary space and beyond. And so from that, a lot of them became deaf poets with Deaf Poetry Jam, won Tony Awards. So it's
a crossover, which is so incredible. So you graduate from Cornell. You weren't writing poems. What were you doing?
So yes, I was not writing poems. I literally
on that one.
I'm like, I stopped writing poetry when I graduated because
what happened? Was it like the reality of life or
I graduated during the recession. The Great Recession in 2010. And there was and also a little bit about my experience at Cornell. I ended up pledging a Latino fraternity called La Unidad Latina. And
you were a frat boy.
Yeah. And not only that, I became president of our council and then became like one of the 3 council presidents managing the entire Greek system, representing a third of campus. So I became a major leader on campus. And there was this pressure to have like your gig by November. And if you didn't have your plan, you were kind of like, there's something wrong with this kid. Like I got very caught up in the other people's impressions of me and my reputation. And so I was like, okay, well, there's this thing. I'm very passionate about educational inequity, given my background. I'm going to do Teach for America. And Teach for America was the thing because their brand was really good. They recruited all these amazing places and they were guaranteeing you a job. So I was like, I can have gainful employment by November. Let me apply. So not only did I apply, I worked for them as a campus ambassador, got it. And so by November, I knew I was moving to Miami to teach.
So that was like a set piece and a smart move on your part, because you're right. You came out during the recession. Teach for America is very well respected. A lot of people that have that on their resume have gone on to do incredible things. So off you went to Miami, not writing poetry. Now you're an educator.
Teaching it. And I would love those units that I got to teach it. But so I was teaching in Miami. I was teaching middle school language arts. So I was teaching 7th graders in North Miami Middle School. And it was the hardest job I've ever had. They gave us training over the summer. but you're kind of thrown in, and you got to build a train while you're writing it. And it was really challenging, very humbling. And like, I think given my own trajectory coming from the public schools that I went to Cornell, to going back into a public school, there was a lot of like internal stuff that I was working through about just feeling like I was treated like this at this place, and now my kids won't even respect me and listen to me. So it was really challenging. And it was
Cornell, and now you're dealing with kids that really could give to that you came out of Cornell.
Literally.
Yeah. And middle school, Nicco, middle school is the absolute worst.
It is. It's the best, but also the worst. Like,
their hormones are like all mixed up, and and then there you are in Miami.
Yeah. And and Miami's a great party town, right? And I was in the closet. So, and I was away from home, from everybody that I went to college with. And so it was a place for me to sort of like just work really hard and play really hard. And so I was sort of caught up in this, like, always behind on grading, always behind on lesson planning, because I was partying every weekend. And I didn't really realize it until much later in my life, that I was like, oh, like, I was not coping with the stress of adulthood well when I started.
Well, you were coping with it the only way you knew how was to go. And you were really on your own. And, Miami is not New York. It's different. No. It's certainly not the safe world of a Cornell, of an institution like that, or a fraternity or any of those things. So all your safety stopgaps were pulled out. And then at this point, I think you were kind of coming out. Am I correct?
Yes, I was coming to terms with it. Also, another thing that was not, being a New Yorker, I didn't know how to drive. So I went to Miami without a license and no car. This is pre-Uber. So I was literally like on the phone waiting for cabs.
I need a ride.
Yeah, or like the kindness and generosity of my friends in the Teach for America Corps that I worked with. So yeah, I was really out of my comfort zone in a lot of ways. And then coming to terms with my sexuality, I was closeted at first when I was in TFA. And then throughout the years, I sort of like came out to my Teach for America crew down there. Right. And then I started working for TFA staff during a summer program. So that was the first place that I was out at work. So I was out at work before I was out to my family and to a lot of my close friends.
But that's a tough one, because out at work, nobody knows you except the people you're working with. Your family's a whole other thing. This is the core you grew up with, and your family is close. And now all of a sudden you're hitting them, especially Latino culture is, as you know, I'm not stereotyping, but it is a macho culture.
Yeah, machismo is very much alive and well. And I'm the firstborn son of the firstborn son, right? Wow. And growing up, like, it was sort of like a real pain point, because I was always very much sensitive. I loved creativity. I had dolls, and I always wanted dolls for Christmas, and my birthday's around Christmas. So there was always like a lot of just weird vibes growing up.
Sure.
And so I internalized that like something inherently is wrong with me. And so I learned.
Right. I can totally see how.
Yeah. And so it wasn't anything like cruel from my family, but I could tell that there was like a judgment, and that I needed to edit how I was in order to gain approval or acceptance.
Wow.
And that's a lot when you're like 5 or 6,
It's a lot. And then let's talk about your environment, the kids that you played with, kids that you went to school with. This is not something that is totally understood all the time. Although I have to tell you, in my neighborhood, I'm going back to the 70s and the 60s, people that came out as gay in my neighborhood, there was no coming out. They just were. And nobody gave a hoot. Like, it wasn't even a discussion. So-and-so's a tomboy. Oh, this one is like, he likes to hang out with the girls. That was as far as any of it got.
That was me. Every lunch I was with the girls playing double dutch. Like, that was me.
Are you good? I need to ask this. Are you good at double dutch?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I would watch, and I would give it, and I would turn. Like the hand games, like, this was all pre-iPhones and like whatever. So we played at recess, but I digress. But yeah, so growing up was hard because, you know, I was academically very confident and very like I knew I loved learning in school, but
Right.
school was also a place where like I was targeted because of like how I just was, and they would call me fairy boy and different things. So it was difficult to navigate, and I think that's where my sense of humor came from, because I was like, if I'm making the bullies laugh, they're not gonna bully me. It's
That's
like
exactly right.
it was like my coping strategy. So yeah, it was definitely a difficult space to navigate, but somehow it definitely gave me a lot of characteristics that I rely on today just to navigate most social situations.
Are you
Humor
kidding? Like
among them.
comedy and being able to turn even in a social situation a negative into something funny. That's always been my secret to getting along with people. Now,
Yeah,
I'm just going to get a little off the grid here. Do you
no
have in
worries.
your book any poetry that reflects what we were just talking about, the school thing, the bullying thing, who you were growing up?
That's a good question. Nothing directly. And the reason why is a lot of the poetry that was written here was in response to like pandemic times and like a breakup that I was going through, a breakup with the person I thought I was supposed to be, first of all, and then with some people along the way who weren't aligning with the new version of myself that I the true version of myself that I needed to be.
The true,
So
the new version that was the true version of
right,
who you were.
it was
What was
really a return. Yeah.
yeah, what was the problem people had with that?
I mean, I had because I had internalized the belief that I was not worthy of love and belonging as I naturally am, that I needed to people please and accommodate in order for people to be in my life. Like it's like I need to accept these things that you bother me about you or that you're mean to me about, because otherwise I'm going to be alone.
Right.
And one of the things I need to come to terms with is like, if you need to be alone, then you need to be alone.
And
And
it's perfectly fine to be alone, and you don't have to put up with anyone else's garbage either.
no,
But, we all, there are some people that never go through that, but many people, the people pleasing things, and we call it the ability to be accepted. We
yeah,
want to be accepted, we want to be loved.
yeah.
Instead of really realizing at the end of the day, by accepting yourself and who you are, makes you loved because you love yourself. That's the most important lesson.
Literally, and it is one that I'm learning every day, getting better at, and it's not like one night to the next,
Right.
it's literally a constant journey. But so that reflects this journey. I am working on a book about my childhood. Currently, that's like the second project that I'm currently working on. It's really about exploring my origins and like where situating me as Nicco and what was I going through back then, because I don't think I was ready to like go there when I wrote this book. Like I just needed to like, but now I feel more emotionally equipped to kind of like reflect, go back and figure out like what was the pain that I was going through back then that I still carry with me today. But yeah,
I totally love your honesty. I have a quote from you that when you write, you heal yourself and you hope that it heals others. That takes a lot to be able to say that, and your own self-realization is really quite incredible. Did this happen, do you think, because of the pandemic? Did that shake it up for you?
definitely. I have it here from the
Yes.
preface right now where I wrote, in truth, however, I've been unhappy for a long time in my work, in my relationships, in most facets of my life. I've languished as I chased false dreams implanted in my brain by false gods. Money, power, status, all things I learned to acquire through sheer force of will, while neglecting my spark to create, to imagine, to write. And yeah, like I really valued those things, but being stripped of those trappings
Right.
and all the things that I'm supposed to want and supposed to have. And I'm just, because I lost my, so we didn't even get through it. So I did TFA, worked the corporate job for, on the recruitment side of Teach for America, traveling at Dartmouth, at Tufts, at Harvard, at Cornell, recruiting people.
All the Ivies, all of them.
And I did CUNY too. So I was, and all of New York State. So I really recruited all over the Northeast.
Amazing.
But then worked for a charter school in New York, and I was making six figures. Like, what? Like, more money than I ever dreamt of that I would be making. And then pandemic came around, and I was, no more job, dream over, and I'm on unemployment like everybody else.
Rug pulled out from underneath, earthquake.
Yeah, and so I'm like, okay, what do I do now?
Right.
And all I could do was write. So I knew that was my natural state. That was who I was without the distractions, without the noise. Right. And so that's what brought me to this book. And these poems were written over those 3 years in the pandemic. So yeah, for sure, the pandemic was the
catalyst
to really spark all this.
Nicco, there's one poem in particular I think really reflects a lot of what we've been talking about. And again, this is just my choice. A Villain Makes on page 19.
Yes.
Can you read that for us?
Of course.
Thank you. I just feel it's very reflective of a lot of the things we've spoken about.
This one was fun to write. Okay. A Villain Makes. Lords, I protest. My soul is full of woe that blood should sprinkle me to make me grow. Richard II. Kill your darlings. Take your shot. Slay, evil queen. Heads will roll. I've entered the villain stage of my life. Or that's what everyone's been telling me. More malevolent than Maleficent. More unscrupulous than Ursula. More cruel than Cruella. Putting up with no bullshit. Standing up for what I believe. Upholding my boundaries. Inner peace over outer peace. Sometimes people need their feelings hurt. It isn't personal, but if it feels that way, I cannot do anything about it. No longer a damsel in distress, I have freed myself from the tower. Unburdened shoulders, shirk that weight like a cape I no longer wish to wear. I slayed the fire, breathing of my beliefs, and it feels good to be bad. If this a villain makes, so be it. Off with his head.
Wow. Where were you in your life when you wrote this?
Again, I was in a number of very codependent relationships. And, a lot of times in codependent relationships, you realize, oh, hey, that person's a narcissist. And I know that word is used a lot in, pop psychology and the internet, but genuinely, when you really feel like, wow, this person just is using me for attention and supply, but not really caring about my needs. Like, I'm just the sad clown. It feels like you're being mean when you're just setting a boundary. When you say no to something and a person reacts with a particular sense of entitlement or outrage because you said no, and you're just like, no, I'm going to go to sleep instead of going out tonight.
Right.
It really is like, you feel like I'm being different, but I'm just protecting myself. And if you don't get that, then fine, I'll be a villain. I'll play that role. Because,
how did you make it okay? What realization did you come to make it okay to set that boundary? Because this is a big thing a lot of people deal with, is setting boundaries and not caring how people react to that boundary. What made it okay for you?
Yeah, I think one of the lines is like inner peace over outer peace is one that has really stuck with me, because I think, as you're a woman, I'm a queer man of color. There's a lot of times where we don't want to shake the table. We want to just like, I don't want to feel like, we shrink ourselves. And we do that as a way to appease people and to kind of like keep going through situations that may be uncomfortable or even toxic and bad for us. And so I realized that, like, if it's a choice between because then also like there's another quote like depression is rage turned inward. And I found that I was feeling depressed all the time and unable to like go for a walk, cook food, whatever, because I was like swallowing these like negative emotions instead of expressing them.
Well,
And I was
they
like,
immobilize you. That's exactly what happens. You become
yeah. And so I was like, wait, like if I don't speak up, nobody's gonna like nobody cares if I'm at home by myself and
Right.
can't do the thing. So I just need to speak up. It's literally 2 seconds versus like 3 days of my time. So there's no harm. It's
Right.
literally like just a calculation. And when you realize that, you're like, okay, like I just got to be uncomfortable for these 2 seconds and then I'm good for the next 3 days. And there's a way to express like set boundaries and express discontent in a way that isn't, violent, but it
Right.
still stands your ground, and I think sometimes people do need their feelings hurt because they need to know that what they did wasn't okay. So
but the person, you need to be okay, and you are with it to do that. I think prior to this period, it wasn't okay for you. You were swallowing these negative emotions, and they immobilize you. They do create rage inside of a person, repressed rage and anger, because you didn't make it okay for yourself to set that boundary.
Yeah.
These are big life lessons. And I'm loving this conversation because you're young and you learned this. There are people that go decades. And I have people I know now that I'm thinking of that are like 50 years old that still don't know this, and they're still all worried, and they're still people pleasing and all of that.
It's hard. I mean, there's still things to do now that lead me down that path. But I realize the pandemic again.
Yeah.
It was like if you didn't have an existential crisis during the pandemic, like were you doing the pandemic right? Like it really forced me to look inward and ask myself, if I were to die tomorrow, how would I feel about my life?
Right.
And I wasn't happy with it. And so I was like, you know what? Like it's my life and I need to take control of my life, even if that ruffles feathers, even if that makes people uncomfortable, because I will not shrink myself anymore. I could die tomorrow.
Because it's your life and you have a right to do that. And within that, if you fail, you fail. But you also have a right to do that. And if you don't get out there and attempt to do what you want to do, you'll never know. Listen, lots of people choose safe paths, I've always been a risk taker. I don't like where I am in my life right now because the pandemic turned everything for me inside out, upside down.
Yes.
I've cobbled together a whole new world, and it's got way too many things in it right now. And I know it. And I'm focusing, right? I'm pulling in the thing that's going to work the best for me right now. But you're right. Like, people that went through the pandemic, there were people though, Nicco, that nothing changed for. I know, I have to tell you, I have friends in finance and in tech. God bless, they took their computers home and they got paid the same 6 figures and the same bonus.
Yep.
And they didn't have to haul into an office and nothing changed for them. Whereas I'm a creative. I've never done anything except creative stuff. And I had to figure it out for myself. I'm still not there. I'm still not in a comfort zone. I love talking to people like you because you're not in a comfort zone either.
No, and I've accepted I never will be. But it reminds me of Funny Girl. I watched Funny Girl last night.
Oh my God, that's such a great wow.
And she says it with the main song where she's like, "Don't tell me not to live and sit and butter." Right. It's it's her life, so let her make her mistakes.
Right. Right.
But
don't rain on my parade.
And Babs said it best. So
you're not going to believe this. This is a perfect out for us because we have 1 minute left.
Okay.
Don't rain on my parade. In your 1 minute, tell us where people can find you and what you've got coming up.
Wendy, thank you so much for having me.
This has been please. An amazing
conversation. Please support me. This is un chin chin. It means just a little bit, just the beginning. Please follow my adventure, my journey on Instagram at NiccoDiaz.nyc. That's where I post most of my work. And this is not the last book. This is just the beginning. So thank you again, Wendy, for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And the last thing I do as the clock ticks, I love taking these pictures online. So look at me, cheese. You're perfect. Thank you. That's great.
You.
I love computer pictures. It's just,
Yeah.
maybe show with computer pictures, and you'll come and read poetry. You know, I love it.
Yes. I'll do it.
Nicco, thank you so much.
No
And
problem.
to everybody who tunes in, thank you. Please get in touch with him. Get Unchinchin. It's wonderful. I love the way it smells, the smoothness of the cover. This is the reason you don't want a Kindle, okay? You want to touch it and feel it.
Support your local bookstores. Yes,
Support
but support your local bookmakers.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nicco. And good night. See you next week.